Hey there, marketers, and welcome to another Fireside Chat with me, Monique Ruiz, a marketing director here at Claritas. The month that we're recording this is May, which, as I'm sure most of you watching know, is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And to celebrate, Claritas just recently released our 2023 Asian American Market Report, which you can find via the link in the description box down below. If that wasn't exciting enough, though, I'm honored to have Jay Kim, president of AAZA, with me to talk about AAPI audiences. So, Jay, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
I am excellent. Thank you for joining me today.
Excited to be here.
I-
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, tell us a little bit about what your life as president of AAZA is like.
So, I originally started my career in life as a biochemist, working with HIV and Lyme disease. And after a year of that, having to wear safety goggles at all times, gloves, and put my hands in those crazy things, I realized it was too dangerous. So I wanted to switch, and I somehow made a switch from biochem to sports marketing. Worked for IMG for 5 years, and then moved to LA. Started working for a Omnicom agency called Direct Partners, working on a interactive department, overseeing it. And then in 2010, I made my transition to multicultural marketing agency, AAZA, and I realized that it's my passion is, and I love my job because of this, is that I love educating and bringing awareness and empowerment to Asian American community. Because throughout my career in this agency, I get to educate the corporate America about Asian Americans, all the nuances, and I feel like every time I do that, there's a ripple effect, right? Once they're aware,
Yeah.
then they talk to their colleagues and whoever, and they get to educate them. So it's great to be able to pay it forward, and that's sort of what we do, at AZA as my role. I do a lot of kind of
Yeah.
these kind of things, and it's my joy to be able to talk on behalf of the Asian American community.
Well, it's always good to love your job, have a passion for it, and have that personal connection as well. So, very cool. And tell us, how does AZA work with brands and clients today? Like, what kind of services do you provide for them?
So, basically we provide, hence AZA, our name stands for All American A to Z Agency. And when I say All American, I'm talking about diverse, like Los Angeles, like All American. And
Yeah.
we used to be called AZA as an Asian American A to Z agency. And we had to
Okay.
change the name because our clients start to ask to add additional segments, right? Additional immigrants because of how we do our approach and our philosophy. So basically, we're providing in culture and in language, with both of them being in depth marketing and advertising service to our clients on a very different form, A to Z. And
Hmm.
anything that is required, we really do anything from service oriented, call centers, marketing research, digital, experiential. Again, A to Z, and that's what we do for our clients.
Yeah, the whole gamut. So I think you can agree with me here that regardless of the industry that you serve as a brand, customer feedback is super important. So what kind of feedback do you see from Asian American communities when it comes to the marketing directed towards them? And what I mean by that is there something they wish brands did or kind of took into consideration, or do they feel as though brands tend to get certain things consistently right or consistently wrong?
Yes. So seeing more of themselves is quite important because that way there's more engagement, right?
Yeah.
And avoid any kind of Pan Asian when possible because it doesn't really relate because there's no one ring to rule them all, right? So if they're gonna tell the story, do it from more of a pick a segment and tell a compelling story, right? That because that itself can resonate with all as an immigrant as a minority. There's plenty of ways to that story can be really relevant. Um, and then 60% of Asian Americans are foreign born, and 60% speak by both languages at home. So I
Mm.
think just because wanting to avoid doing it in language to do a well-rounded 360 campaign, sometimes only focusing on the digital and English kind of target. I think sometimes you leave out the rest, and what that
Yeah.
does is not investing into the community, right? Only doing diverse and inclusion, but not really doing equity portion. So I think
Right.
that's another key part on a lot of the what this community would like to see. And Asian American media companies, again, like I said, is really important because they're the one that does all the cultural festivals, right? Which is a key way, and there's a great engagement, and shows that hey, these brands really do care. They invest and they come and sit and eat with us, and I think that's most crucial.
Hmm. Yeah. And so I've had a lot of fireside chat conversations over the years. And this is a question that I always ask my guests because there's always room for improvement in the way that brands choose to go to market. So I will ask you for your thoughts as well. What can brands do to ensure that they continue to focus on multicultural communities like Asian Americans beyond the Cultural Heritage Month?
So, Asian Americans are beyond Lunar New Year's and month of May, right? Exactly what you said. And so, number one, like they spend money all year round, okay? And again, they're the biggest shoppers. So, like I said in previous kind of question, I think doing the moral equity part is the key. When it comes to research, and that's one of the biggest issues because for Asian Americans, you have six different groups of that makes up majority of Asian Americans, 87%, and in that you have three segments specifically that prefers in language and English.
Hmm.
So when you're doing research, with African American, it's just English. Hispanic is Spanish and English, whereas Asian American, you got to consider all the languages. There's so many different parts. So your research budget starts to quadruple. And then what happened is because well, it's too expensive and there are only 22 million, let's just cancel it. And I think that's where you're leaving the money on the table. Again, 1.6 trillion spending power by 2024, and most loyal and longest living than average. So you're looking at some prime consumers that you're missing out because you're not willing to invest on the research, willing to look into it, willing to hire additional person to do your multicultural marketing.
Right, exactly. So I do want to ask you a little bit about advertising. Is there a mix of channel? You kind of talked about it a little bit, but is there a mix of channels that you've noticed that seem to perform exceptionally well with the Asian American community, whether it's as a whole, by generation, acculturation, or otherwise?
Yeah, and obviously, it depends on the brand of the product, right? So
Right.
some
Hmm.
are, younger generation are, tend to have different, the more digital savvy versus older generation, more language dependent. But I think rarely brands are able to have product that reach them all.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of times that they the brands that does this well, and I can think of McDonald's, is they do it all levels and reaching traditional media and digital, having it in language and also in culture, so that they can kind of do a gambit. Therefore, they're going to have a very loyal Asian American consumer. So that's one of the examples that I can see that they've done a great job in the mixed channel. And obviously, the right thing to do for brand as a brand manager is to do a 360, right? Again, not
Yeah.
foregoing the 60% of foreign more in language, but rather only focusing on the 40%. And because of sometimes the traditional media lacks data reporting system, unlike digital, I think sometimes we get so stuck wanting to do digital because it's easier to justify the spend and the budget that every manager fight for. Yet, as a right thing to do for the brand, you're leaving out a whole lot.
Mm. Yeah, that's so true. And you're talking about data, so let data be your guide when making decisions that are impacting your brand, your budget, your reputation. And Claritas and AZA, we have a core philosophy that matches of data being king. So I know that you guys utilize census data, programmatic modeling, and even our own Claritas culture codes in the work that you do with your clients. So how do these resources sort of help you in the go to market approach on behalf of your clients?
Yeah, a lot of times our clients will ask us, "Well, give us the data and back it up," right? And as I mentioned, the reasons why there's a lack in Asian American data, it's tough. And Claritas is the one that seems to have one of the best data when it's looking at Asian Americans. So that's why we leverage a lot, and we like the culture code because it does a great job of AA1, very westernized, to AA5, very unacculturated, and we kind of see that how to leverage, how to speak to them. So for us, our approach is we use data as to who and what, we use insights as why or why aren't they, and then we use culture cycle as to how to speak to them. Where are they in their culture that we can be most engaging? So, again, many times our clients are asking for, backup data. We have a lot of insights. And so sometimes because of lack of data, we have to use insights, very limited data, and really, and also the clients need to have open minds, right?
Mm,
The same rule that they apply to general market cannot be applied to Asian Americans, just because
right.
Asian media, a lot of them don't have minority owned certificates because they are owned by the content provider from the motherland, right? So there's that issue, and there's many things to overhaul. Sometimes we have to deal with like a STAG requirement using shooting a commercial. I'm like, well, like there's no in language speaking, especially well actors that we can use. So they should always
Yeah.
be open to make an exception when it comes to looking at those things. So obviously, data is always important, and I can't be enough advocate to companies and brands invest in the data.
Right. And you actually just kind of segued me into my next question. So, before I interview any of my guests, I always like to visit their website to see if there's anything about the company that I wasn't necessarily familiar with beforehand. And when I was browsing your website, I noticed you have a tool called Culture Cycle. So, can you talk to, and you just mentioned it, can you talk to us a little bit more about what Culture Cycle is and how you use that to support the clients that you work with?
Sure. So we use culture cycle as how, right? Is how we speak to them, how to talk to them. And after a while, doing many immigrants, we start to see a trend. Okay, and we took Ucensus, Claritas, Scarborough, all the data we can gather, and looked at it and came up with our own proprietary algorithm. And what we realized is when a person immigrates to a person is born in a culture, immigrates to another culture, or born within a culture that is a different culture than the whole, and navigates in their life, that there is a cycle. Just like a salmon, when it's spawned in the freshwater, goes into ocean, and when they're late in life, they come back because imprint of the exact chemicals and all those things. So in culture cycle, when a person is born, what they smell, see, taste, hear is imprinted, and the culture of the parents become the child's culture. So, for example, if
Mm-hmm.
Korean Americans, they're born, the food, the smell, the language, all those things are imprinted into the child. And also, 70% of Asian Americans marry within Asian Americans. So one of the questions that I also have to answer is, what language do we speak to our child? So when we looked at it, it becomes a circle within a circle where, once they're born to the culture is as a pinnacle point, but as they go through high school, college, they go further away. But when they start to work, do get into relationship and marriage, they come right back because more families,
Right.
involvement, and then when they do parenting is where they come right back because they realize, what, this is my culture. I want to give it back. I want to teach the child the culture, so I have to watch more in culture, language, TV, showcase to my children, get involved in the community. And as they go through the parenting and the legacies, they also realize, hey, this is who I am. This is what defines me.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a culture cycle in that. And also the culture cycle showcases the sandwich generation, right? Like myself, where I have first generation parents, very language dependent, so that I become their advisor on everything and
Mm.
translator.
Yep.
And then I have a second generation child who I'm trying to teach the Korean culture to. So I am sandwiched between the two of them, having to live in both worlds simultaneously,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So like if you were to take the culture cycle and put product on it, let's say for example a minivan. mini van will fit right at the parenting, right? Because they
Mm,
have to have, because the grandparents come stay with the to visit the child. You need a car to go all the places, and then that's when we need to speak to them, knowing that they're fully back into the culture. They're more culture relevant. Their community is important to them. The kids go to Saturday language school, right? So all these things kind of tell us where they are and how we can engage with them so that we can show certain scenarios that are more relevant to them because they're going through it. So that's kind of
mm,
how
okay.
the culture cycle we use for as to how to speak to them and how to engage with
Okay. So, speaking of culture and affinity, some data will show you that certain consumer groups they just have an affinity towards specific brands or types of brands. So, instead of completely ignoring these consumer groups, how have you helped brands create the awareness and consideration with the consumers who don't necessarily have that affinity towards them?
them. Right. So we always say whatever happens in Asia crosses over next day, right? So because of cell phone, because of social media, it comes pretty quick.
Yeah.
And that example is great for us when we work with Ford and we notice that Lincoln has high brand affinity because Lincoln is like luxurious car in China. Right?
Right.
When you go to their dealer, it's very luxurious. They give you like
Mm,
drinks and this beautiful, well designed showrooms, almost like at the luxury car like Porsche and those kind of level. And
okay.
when we share that with the Ford, they're very interested that there's a brand affinity. And when we actually execute an event, specifically to Chinese Americans, there's a lot of brand affinity because to them, the Lincoln of the luxury car is price is very high in country, but in here much cheaper. So there is that
Hmm.
effect as well. So we were able to have a quite successful experiential and branding for campaigns for Lincoln to Chinese Americans.
Okay. Very cool. And we'll make sure to link, I think you have that case study on your website. So we'll make sure to link it in the description box for anybody who wants to check that out in more detail. But let me switch to kind of a different topic. So, privacy is a daily conversation topic here at Claritas. And for the last couple of years, there have been some heightened interest around privacy compliant data collection and uses. And right now, the conversation seems to be focused on what's called sensitive personal information. Do you guys find yourself consulting your clients on privacy at all? And as an agency that is focused on multicultural consumers, what do you have to do to stay on top of this ever changing privacy landscape?
Yeah. That's a tough one. Whenever it comes to a consumer data, we try to avoid just because all the criteria that comes with it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also
It's a lot.
when we're asked to request this data, sometimes a lot of Asian Americans who are lot of times language dependent have a hard time with it as well.
Mm.
So we look at ways, and obviously, I think a lot of times clients also have certain criteria we have to follow depending on
Hmm.
their own privacy criteria. So we have to abide by those. And going to conferences and going to different summits allows us to look at deeper, and especially when it comes to digital, how to deal with these things and trying to constantly be updated.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. During my general market days, we had a consumer relations management system, and going through SOX compliant was not easy. So ever since that, we're if we don't have to touch it, we won't.
Yeah. Yeah. You let your partners deal with that and you extract the insights, the syndicated insights that don't tie back, and you're good.
Exactly.
All right. So I want to kind of go back to talking about campaigns again before we start to wind down the conversation. So, what key performance indicators do you tend to look for to tell you that campaigns are performing well or that brands are meeting the mark when it comes to engaging Asian American audiences?
So these days, a lot of brand managers are used to having dashboards because of digital,
Mm,
and so
okay.
obviously impressions and whatever we can get out of that is a measurement. But I feel like that's lacking in my opinion, and I think what we've seen is from previous is when we do have a video that are in culture or in language and some social media, the engagement that we get, how the consumers that they can relate to. That's so me. I can relate to that. Oh, I've been there. I've been in that situation. That's another showcase that the brand is really having a great, I would say, diversity and inclusion, like a moment engagement with the consumer.
Yeah.
And then I think a lot of times with a brand and when we do a lot of more bigger campaign that using traditional media, sometimes word of mouth where we get feedback in the community is a big KPI for us. And
Yeah.
those things can't be measured unless they
Right.
do a huge brand study. But a lot of times it comes up in a competitive analysis that, sometimes if you do a lot of ads on the TV, especially for 45 plus, they think that brand is the biggest because they spend more. So that's the perception sometimes that they create.
Hmm.
So we also leverage the feedback that we get from the community as well.
Okay. Awesome. So I think it's only appropriate to ask this next question, considering we're having a conversation about multicultural audiences, and you and I both fit into that bucket. So, in addition to AZA being multicultural experts, I noticed that your staff is also highly diverse. So, has that been intentional, or has it been a happy and welcomed accident, for lack of a better word?
I think both.
Okay.
For our agency, because we provide cultural expertise to our clients, when we hire somebody, not only do they have to be a good advertising marketing person, but they also have to have some sort of cultural expertise, ideally,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Whether they speak another language or familiar with the culture, because that's what we rely on, right?
Hmm.
So it's been very difficult for us because we have to put that two criteria to to look for a candidate, and also a lot because of that we sometimes hire um, people, students who
Okay. Yeah.
graduated, and then we end up giving them visa because we need their expertise, and that makes us happy because we're able to help a person become immigrant to this country.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of the one thing. But what must for everyone at our agency is they must have passion for culture. They have to be open-minded to all culture, right? So
Hmm.
if you don't want like if you don't like other countries' culture, other people's culture, you want to be in your only own.
Get out of here.
This is not. There are other places for you, but
Yeah.
our culture is about culture. So you have to have passion for it, and many of
Love
our
that.
employees and colleagues have so much passion for culture. We're always learning. We're always sharing. When we do our potluck day, it becomes international food fest, and everyone's sharing their 100-year-old recipes
Oh,
that
yeah.
they're given from their parents and grandparents, and it's really a great way for us to share, and myself as well, since I love learning about culture.
Yeah, I love to hear that answer. So thank you for sharing. So I did mention that I perused your website earlier, and something interesting that I saw is that you guys are headquartered in LA, but also have what's labeled as your office and retreat house in Hawaii. So tell us more about that location.
Yeah, so our plan of our agency growth is, we feel like we do quite a bit of beyond Asian, but ultimately in
Hmm.
the future we wanted to be sort of the bridge between Asia to US and US to Asia, and that perfect bridge point is Hawaii. So as a 10-year, 20-year plan, I've always wanted to have a office in Hawaii so that it's easier to come in. Who's gonna say no to have a meeting in Hawaii, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
However, the pandemic, changed a lot of things. And working from home, I work from home for quite a bit, and realized, it's not for everybody. Working from home has also mental health issue because we're human. In an advertising market, you have to be around people, right? Because that's
Right.
what we do. We are people to people to people business. So in the pandemic, we're a bit concerned about people's mental health, people's well-being. So we decided to kind of fast forward, wanted to open up office in Hawaii and invest in a house, and everybody who works at AAZA gets 2 weeks to stay there as a vacation or work from Hawaii
Oh,
a year. So it's a little perk, but we want them because working from home, pandemic, especially for a lot of Asian American employees, pandemic was very painful because anti-Asian hate,
yeah,
being worried about obviously COVID-19.
yeah,
So we wanted them to go and spend some relaxing time in Hawaii, and come back refreshed, rejuvenated, and have a good peace of mind, and hopefully that will help in regard to getting some break from from every day, the
yeah.
monotonous of daily life. So that's the reason why we did it, and it's been quite. It gets filled really quick now. It's our
Yeah,
second year.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I hope brands that are seeing this kind of take that example and try to do something even on a smaller scale. Getting your teams together if you're local. It is so important to have that connectivity. So great to hear that. Um, but Jay, I really have enjoyed our conversation today. And prior to today, we had a chance to connect and go over our love of Star Wars. So I know there's a lot more that we could dive deeper in that you touched on, especially the model minority myth and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I do hope that I have the chance to connect with you in the future to talk more about those. But I did want to just thank you for sitting down with me, taking about 45 minutes to chat today with our group.
Oh, my pleasure, and thank you so much. You've been great. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. And before I do let you go, I want to make sure that you do have a chance to plug anything new and exciting that's happening with the agency or the brands that you represent. So the floor is yours.
Oh wow. You know, I think for any of the brand managers, I would like to implore continue to invest, because that's most important part. The more data we have, the better it is for our community. So when you say I stand with AAPI, understand that that also requires investment, right?
Yeah.
It's like I have two kids. One kind of has needs special needs, and the other one is somewhat normal. I can't give same equal care. I have to do equity where I have to put more caring into the one that has special needs versus my other. And I think that is the same with our minority kind of community where you have to invest more for certain, not as much in the other because of the fact that there's a need for it. So
Hmm.
my only thing would be to implore brands to think of it as that way and really work with these Asian American media, Asian American agencies like us, and do more research, invest in doing the research because that really does help the community in the long run.
Right. Yes, exactly. Thanks again, Jay. And thank you to those of you that are watching us, whether at home, in the office, or even on the go. We appreciate the support and we hope that we've given you the type of thought leadership that sparks actionable change in your organization to help you improve the way that you're going to market. And in this case, engaging with the highly diverse and very influential Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander consumer groups. If you want to learn more about Claritas or AZA, visit our respective websites, which you should see pop up on your screen and in the description box below this video. I also encourage you to download our 2023 Asian American Market Report, which is also linked below. And with that, we'll see you next time with another Fireside Chat. Bye now.